There's a tradition in Romania, my native country, that when the little boy or little girl turns one, he or she picks from a tray an object that is supposedly going to determine your passion or what you're going to do in life. And I looked at that tray, and to the astonishment of all the guests in the room, I pushed the tray down, all the little objects fell on the ground, and I ran across the room to the little Hoffman upright piano, and I started to pluck a few notes. 2 years later, at age 3, my mother, who was at the time a professor at the University of Bucharest, professor of English and foreign languages, had started me with a very famous piano. Little boy in little tails, a little big bow tie on the stage of the Bucharest Philharmonic Hall, Athenaeum, in a piano recital. And 3 years after that, I made my debut on the same stage as a piano soloist with the Bucharest Philharmonic Orchestra. And from then on, in a piano recital. And 3 years after that, I made my debut on the same stage as a piano soloist with the Bucharest Philharmonic Orchestra. The piano, as I just mentioned, was my first love, and then that became the organ, the pipe organ, which I discovered at the Bucharest St. Joseph Cathedral in Bucharest, where I became assistant organist. But then together with that, it was the passion of conducting, which actually developed while I was organist at the Bucharest, at the Cathedral of St. Joseph. One of the reasons for that is that during the times of the oppressive times of Ceausescu dictatorship regime, sacred music was not allowed in public spaces at all. God was politically incorrect. So the only places that we could do sacred music was at the cathedral. And we had a wonderful choir and we had a wonderful orchestra. And so I developed the passion for conducting while I was there and so forth. So right now I have a mix of the three. They're very different. The satisfaction of being on stage and commanding an orchestra and the chorus and soloist, it's phenomenal. But on the other hand, I love the piano and the organ, particularly the piano, because I'm completely in charge of what comes out of the keys. As a conductor, I only can tell the people, and it's kind of indirectly, what they're going to do according to what I tell them, according to their talent, their ability, their focus, all that. In answer to your question about which is my love, I have all three of them. They are combined in one, sort of like, in a way, interesting, like the Holy Trinity, that the three that are one. Mostly was a romantic man. I loved the romantic music, you know, all the big sounds, the Chopin, the Rachmaninoff, and the Stravinsky, and so forth. But then the passion for early music developed because I was fascinated by a famous madrigal group called Coro Madrigal in Bucharest, directed by my former mentor Marin Constantin there, that they performed in Renaissance costumes, and I heard that pure, fabulous sound of the Renaissance. I started as my group in almost 5 years ago as a Renaissance group with the pure sound of the Renaissance, but then I expanded slightly. As the years came, I added the classical, added the Baroque, Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, and all that. And then I added Mozart and Beethoven, the classical Viennese. And then occasionally, even now, we slip a little bit further into like Verdi and Brahms and so on, because they are in the classical spirit that they write the music. But it's basically that period because it gives us a specific niche, as opposed to like a Philadelphia orchestra that performs anything from the early on to the contemporary and so forth. We do much more specifically oriented to that. and also because, as I said, I developed a passion for early music after my first part of the life, which was as a pianist with mostly romantic music. Every period of music has its own challenges, and every period of every composer it's different from another. It's a fascinating world, and not only that, but some of the pieces that the same composer wrote that are from different periods of his life, in different keys, written for different occasions. My singers and players, they are used to perform all sorts of music. They are trained into this style with the performance practices, what I call the type of voice, the type of Baroque instruments that are different than modern. I personally, I have done bootlegged jazz when I was in Romania under Ceausescu, who forbade any kind of American music. So jazz was considered the quintessential representation of the decadent American culture. But jazz was, for many, many years, a passion of mine. Now, of course, Gershwin, who is the kind of father of what is called the symphonic jazz, combined the symphonic orchestra with the jazz style, with the jazz rhythms, with the blues, with the swing, plus specific instruments. And so when we did this American in Paris and Porgy and Bess and all that, was an interesting challenge, of course, both to the players and to the audience. To me, it fell in kind of a natural, because I have done this for many years in Eastern Europe, particularly in Romania, and doing both kinds of music. And so it's a very, very challenging, very rewarding, and something that I personally love to do, and so did the audience to hear. When I grew up in Romania, I had to worry about what to perform, and mostly because I was so restricted into my repertoire, as I mentioned earlier, about sacred music and blah, blah, blah. Funding was never a problem. Funding was a state of, so whatever I wanted to do a project, and they liked it because they liked me and so forth, it was fine. When I came here, I faced kind of interesting the reverse, that I could do anything I want if I have the money to pay for it. And so I was very fortunate over the past 25 years to have people that very generous, what I call them super angels, that believed in me and helped me to realize my dream. And however, we still need to have the support of the public, and also as well as private and individual, but also corporate. Basically, people need to know that music is a very important ingredient of the society, the culture, tradition, and so forth. Philadelphia has an enormous cultural tradition that we must maintain and continue, particularly in tough economic times, because it is something that has to do with the inner soul, with the being, and we need that. If you imagine one day that the world would be completely silent, with absolutely no music of any kind, and then you would realize how much we need this.